Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we have a very interesting news story out of the state of Alaska where the Republican governor of the state of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy, is reportedly looking at challenging Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski in the 2028 Alaska Senate race. So an article here by Fox News breaks down the details of all this, which is that the Alaska governor, Mike Dunleavy, is primed to announce a 2028 run for the U.S. Senate against Senator Lisa Murkowski. Murkowski, the Republican legislature, who has repeatedly clashed with President Donald Trump, according to several sources familiar with the situation or close to the governor. He said, quote, he's not going to quit his term, a top source close to Dunleavy, who used to work with him in Juneau, Alaska, told Fox Digital. The next Senate race in the last frontier falls in 2026 for incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan. The last governor to resign to run for higher office, 2008 vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin, who, quote, never recovered, the source says. Dunleavy cares deeply about and wants Alaska to succeed, the source said, adding the governor recently quipped that he can't understand why people would want to live with all this concrete in Washington and not in the verdant Arctic, as one reason the Pennsylvania-born Republican likes to otherwise avoid the East Coast. But he knows that being in Washington is the only way to get things done. And the source said, adding that Dunleavy was the second governor to endorse Trump in 2016, and that a top member of the White House staff said he visits more than any other governor despite a 3,500-mile trek. He's not about an ego and pushing himself in front of the cameras. He gets stuff done. He's not like, please put me on this committee, or I have to attend this ball. He doesn't like those type of things, the source added. This is very big here as well. Trump has talked to him before about running and wants him to run. Dunleavy was notably present at the joint base Elmendorf, Richardson, and Anchorage, Alaska when President Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin back on August 15th. Despite being a red state, it is an uphill climb to get elected governor as a Republican, another source close to the situation told Fox News Digital Wednesday. Former Governor Jay Hammond, who was the last Republican to win re-election there in 1978, another Republican, Sean Parnell, who rose to the job after Palin's departure in 2009, did not technically win re-election during the 2010 cycle that kept him in office. A lot of people that have mentioned this race to him and think it's a very viable option for him, the source said. Obviously, there's a lot of frustrations with Senator Murkowski, he said, adding to the disparity in Trump's relationship between the two Alaskans is no secret. Governor Dunleavy has not only been a successful governor, but a pretty strong ally for him, so it's only natural that he'd be hearing that from Alaskans, but also from folks in the broader MAGA movement. Dunleavy, like Murkowski, has also been successful in the state's ranked choice voting system, which critics of it have slammed as inordinately helping Democrats. Mary Peltola, a Democrat, notably won the seat of the late Republican Rep. Don Young, who held the at-large district for decades back in 2022. Murkowski has also, quote, never faced a challenger like him, someone who has broad support outside conservative circles, the second source noted. It should also be worth noting that this is actually something I learned from this that I did not know before that, as the governor is also close to native communities on the North Slope and beyond, where residents in far-flung communities have praised him for his focus on Alaska's energy, development, potential, and allocation of resources like issues like rural education and infrastructure. A top Alaska political analyst and pollster agreed. Conservatives would welcome an opportunity to unseat Murkowski, he said in an interview on Thursday. The fact that Trump and Murkowski have such a strained relationship and Dunleavy and the president have a good relationship is really what has led us to this point in the conversation. Now, obviously, Dunleavy is term limited as governor going into 2022, which is a large reason this is even remotely a possibility. So the article mentions the fact that Dunleavy would not leave his post as governor to run for the next 2028 Senate race, nor do I think he was going to do that even if he could run for governor again. Dunleavy's election history involves in 2018, he won the first time by about 7 points against Democrat Mark Begich, who there's a lot of Begiches in politics in Alaska, that's funny. But Mike Dunleavy ended up winning in this race by about 7 points. Now, the way this one ended up going was the governor back in 2014 in the state of Alaska was actually independent Bill Walker. Bill Walker won against the Republican Sean Parnell, as the article mentioned, by 48.1% to 45.88%. So a very competitive race, and back in 2014, it was a Republican wave year, but Alaska obviously didn't seem to care and liked the independent governor and voted for him. Now, also showing back in 2010 here to show you what the prior election was, Bill Walker actually did not run in this race. This was Parnell, who won by 21 points. So Parnell was running for re-election and lost to Bill Walker, the independent candidate. Now, 4 years later, in 2018. This time around, Walker was not able to do as well as he did in that one. In 2018, we saw that Mike Dunleavy was leading in a lot of the polls. Bill Walker was polling in a very distant third place, while the Democrat Mark Begich was putting up a very significant fight for such a red state like Alaska. And it ended up being an incumbent who did withdraw from the race because he did not have enough support to justify staying in it. He'd essentially be splitting the vote away from Mark Begich, and that's pretty much what happened there. But Dunleavy ended up winning 51.44%, Begich getting 44.41%, and Bill Walker, though he dropped out, still got around 2% of the vote. Then we come forward to 2022. As we saw the very close elections of the past few years, this one was not very close, Dunleavy winning with 26.1% of the vote. And I do believe in 2018 ranked choice voting, though it was not technically required yet in Alaska, in 2022 it was, but that was not necessary as Mike Dunleavy broke 50% of the vote on the first round, getting 50.29%. So that's where things were at the governor level in the state of Alaska. At the presidential level, it's also interesting because Alaska is a pretty reliably red state, voting for Trump by 13.1% in 2024. It voted for Trump by only 10 points in 2020 and voted for Trump by 14.7 in 2016. Mitt Romney also won it by 14 points in 2012. So it's right around that double-digit number at the presidential level. Now, the Senate race is very interesting. In 2022, Lisa Murkowski ended up winning against the Republican Kelly Tshibaka by about 46.3%. And I have the page pulled up here in the Wikipedia because I want to go on it a little bit more in depth. So Lisa Murkowski was the incumbent U.S. Senator, obviously, and her and President Trump frequently disagree and spat in the media and such, and on social media and such. And President Trump really wanted to primary her out and get a different Republican in there. Kelly Tshibaka, the former commissioner of the Alaska Department of Administration, was President Trump's hand-picked candidate for this race. Maybe Trump would have liked Mike Dunleavy to run, but Dunleavy, the governor, ran for re-election, and President Trump threw all of his support and weight behind Tshibaka. And what happened here was Lisa Murkowski and Tshibaka faced off in the general election, and in Alaska, they have the ranked choice voting system. So the way it works is the winning candidate must break 50% of the vote, and on the first round of voting, if no one breaks 50, the last place candidate's taken away. Their votes are reallocated to their second and third choices and such, and going forward until there's only two candidates left and one breaks 50% because they have to at that point. The Alaska Survey Research poll from October, the most recent one before the election, showed a very close vote on the first round of voting, and then the last one ended up being about a 12-point win for Murkowski versus Tshibaka. And that's pretty much where things looked like it was ending up, but on election day, it was still pretty close. Murkowski and Tshibaka on the first choice round, Murkowski only won 43.37% to Tshibaka's 42.6%. So it was a pretty close split at that point, including a Democratic candidate, Pat Chesbrough, who won 10.37% of the vote, roughly 27,000 votes. And you would bet if there are any Democratic voters in Alaska that had to choose between the hand-picked Donald Trump endorsed candidate or the anti-Trump Republican candidate, probably not too much of a hard choice for them to make in that regard. There's also another Republican in the race that did withdraw, but he did get roughly 7,500 votes that did have to get allocated as well. So the first choice happens, the first round happens where the write-in candidate is taken away, then the second round where the Republican candidate that withdrew is taken away, and it ends up with 44.49, 44.32, and then the Democrats' 29,134 votes. So then the Democrats' votes are taken away and allocated to Murkowski and Tshibaka. And what happens here? We see the votes for Tshibaka go from 115 to about 117, but Murkowski goes from 115 all the way up to 136. So most of those 29,134 votes, roughly just doing quick math here, about 21,000 or so of them ended up going towards Lisa Murkowski. Only about 2,000 ended up going towards Kelly Tshibaka. So it was a very close election, very competitive election, but it was enough for Lisa Murkowski to pull out the victory. So I'm bringing this up for 2028 because things are going to be very interesting. Because if Murkowski does decide to run for Senate in 2028 again, and if she does choose to do so as the Republican incumbent, there's always some rumors that Murkowski may leave the Republican Party and run for re-election as independent if she does. And that scenario could be very interesting as well. But if Murkowski decides to run again for re-election and face off against Mike Dunleavy, we may see a very similar situation to what happened in 2022. But that being said, given Dunleavy's popularity as governor of Alaska, I think it would be a much more formidable challenge to Murkowski than Kelly Tshibaka did. Yes, Tshibaka had the endorsement of President Trump and pretty much all the support thrown behind her, but Mike Dunleavy also has the mantle of being the governor, or this time former governor of the state of Alaska, when this race does end up happening. So there is real potential, as this was only about a 7-point race, that Murkowski could be primary challenged by Mike Dunleavy. But as this race also showed, that Lisa Murkowski taking her down is going to be a very difficult fight. But obviously this race will be up in 2028, not 2026, so there's still a long ways to go about this. The Senate map in 2022 will be the Senate map that is up. It's possible also, after serving multiple terms, Lisa Murkowski may decide just to retire in 2028 and not want to go through another electoral fight like she did in 2022. Maybe she decides just to retire, and then maybe, depending on what the national environment is looking like in 2028 for the Republicans, maybe she decides the time is right to retire. But these are all speculation and time to talk about for a future date. But it's an interesting conversation that we could see another very competitive Alaska election like we saw in 2022 with the ranked choice voting system with Lisa Murkowski, maybe Mike Dunleavy. It'd be very interesting. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Leave it all down in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below with some of your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we have a very interesting story out of the state of Texas, one that we really don't see too often, which is that former MLB player Mark Teixeira, who may remember is a player for a long time for the New York Yankees, including on their World Series run, has officially announced that he is running for Congress in the state of Texas. The 45-year-old ex-Yankee echoed much of President Donald Trump's America First agenda and his campaign launch. The article from NBC News goes over this more in depth, who says that the former Major League Baseball All-Star Mark Teixeira, who played for the New York Yankees the last time they won a World Series in 2009, announced last Thursday that he'd be running for a House seat in Texas and is echoing much of Donald Trump's agenda in his campaign launch. He said, quote, "As a proud Texan and lifelong conservative who loves our country, I'm ready to fight for the principles that makes Texas strong and America exceptional," Teixeira said in a statement announcing his bid for Texas's 21st district. He added, "It takes teamwork to win, and I'm ready to help defend President Trump's America First agenda, Texas families, and individual liberty." Teixeira, who is 45 years old, is running for the seat held by Representative Chip Roy, a Republican from Texas, who recently announced plans to run for Texas Attorney General. The 21st Congressional District covers the area just north of the city of San Antonio. Congressman Chip Roy has represented this district with unwavering courage and leaves an impressive legacy of principled conservative leadership, Teixeira said in a statement. "I'm running to ensure the District 21 remains prosperous and free for generations to come." Teixeira's name recognition in New York and his general high profile as a professional athlete will likely benefit him with fundraising in this race. Teixeira, a former first baseman, played 14 seasons for 4 major league teams, including the Texas Rangers, Atlanta Braves, Los Angeles Angels, and most recently the New York Yankees. He retired after the 2016 season. He and his wife eventually moved back to Texas in 2021, where he said they've raised their children, pursued business opportunities, and supported education and Christian ministries. He's also not the only baseball player or member of the 2009 Yankees World Series team to join, quote, Trump's clubhouse. Mariano Rivera, the Hall of Fame closer who won 5 championship rings with the Yankees, also endorsed President Trump. The president has also awarded Rivera with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Johnny Damon, another former All-Star who played for the 2009 Yankees World Series team, is also a supporter of President Trump. In 2020, Trump nominated both Rivera and Damon to join the President's Council on Sports Fitness and Nutrition. The seat Teixeira is running for is considered to be very safe for the Republicans. Roy easily won re-election last year by 26% of the vote. Republicans face a tough road ahead, though, in next year's midterm elections. They try to hold on to their slim majority in the House. Democrats are only 3 seats short of taking control. The state legislature just approved new district lines that could net the party up to 5 seats in the congressional delegation. Some opponents of those lines have sued and asked a court to block their implementation, but that likely won't have a significant effect on Teixeira's bid, as Roy is vacating his seat to run for statewide office regardless. This NBC article is written by Rebecca Shabad and Ben Kamsar. Make sure to go check that out and give them the credit for writing this up. So this is really interesting. In the district that he is running for, Mark Teixeira is running for, is District 21 right here. The Cook PVI has it listed at Republican plus 11. So I haven't seen any reports about how the redistricting could actually maybe affect Texas 21 or if it affects it at all with the vote. But for right now, it's a pretty red district. Being around Republican plus 11 puts it in the likely Republican category. and whoever the Republican ends up being the nominee will probably win this general election. So in this district, which extends from North San Antonio to Central and South Austin, taking in parts of the rural Texas Hill country, the incumbent, as the article mentioned, is Chip Roy. He is not running again. Mark Teixeira is now the first Republican officially declared in this race. Another Republican, Daniel Betts, a nominee for Travis County District Attorney in 2024, has filed paperwork to run. Kyle St. Clair and Mark White have both publicly expressed interest. St. Clair, a vice chair of the Bexar County Republican Party and candidate for the 28th District in 2024, nominee for the 20th District in 2022. Mark White, a San Antonio City Councilor from the 10th District from 2023 on, and candidate for Texas's 121st House Representative District in 2018. We already know that Aaron Wright and Chip Roy have both ruled out running for this race, as both of them are currently running for Attorney General of Texas. So that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. As for the Republicans in this race, I'm not too familiar with Sinclair or Mark White, but Mark Teixeira, possible. He could get an endorsement from President Trump, especially being on that Yankees winning team. President Trump obviously is a big baseball fan, and being from New York, he's a big Yankees fan, I'm sure. So Trump may endorse Teixeira in this Republican primary. If he does, I think Teixeira has a very strong chance of winning it. Without Trump endorsing Teixeira in this primary, I think he still has a very strong chance at winning it. Him also playing for the Rangers, I think, will also give him a little bit of an added boost. But I'm sure Mark Teixeira starts out with a lot of name recognition, and that will likely help his chances at winning this Republican primary. As for the Democrats, none are currently mentioned of running at this current point in time. If that does change, if any Democrats run, I'll probably do a video updating that. But for now, this race is listed as solid Republican. For the Cook Political Report and Inside Elections, it's expected to say very red. And as I mentioned, the Texas's 21 district, Chip Roy won it by 25.8% against the Democrat Hook. This is what the district looks like, and obviously it's a very safe win for Chip Roy. The election history before that, back in 2022, Roy won it by 25.7%. 2020, before it was redrawn into what it is now, the prior district that took this area, Roy won it by 6.6%. But again, we're not going to see it likely be any close to that margin, as this district has got redistricted and is a lot more red now. And also, just worth mentioning, Texas is redrawing its House map as well. We've been covering this in several videos on the channel now, and that's playing into a very competitive election in 2026 for the House map, as the midterm election year suggests that the Democrats should be in for a very good night. Republicans are trying to redraw several states' House maps to try and minimize the damage as much as possible and flip as many Democratic seats red as they can. So it's very interesting to see how this is all playing out, and we're having to wait and see. That's happening in Texas, maybe in California, Florida, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio, Maryland perhaps. It's really happening everywhere, so I have to wait and see how that all goes. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we are talking about the 2026 Texas Senate race and a very interesting development that is happening in its Republican primary. So a new poll last Tuesday showed Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton with only a slight lead over Texas Senator John Cornyn, who currently holds the seat for the U.S. Senate. The recent poll, indicating Paxton leading Cornyn by 5 points in the Texas GOP Senate primary, reflects Paxton's strong appeal among MAGA Trump loyalists, bolstered by his 2023 impeachment acquittal and alignment with MAGA priorities, said political analyst Craig Angranoff told Newsweek. Now, the outcome of this GOP primary in Texas could shape the competitiveness of the 2026 general election in the usually very reliably red state and affect the national Senate map. Control of the U.S. Senate remains narrowly held by Republicans, and Democrats have scouted for competitive opportunities in states outside the party's 2024 map. A divisive or weak Republican nominee in Texas could alter general election dynamics in a state where the Democrats have not won a Senate seat since 1988, so it's certainly been a very long time. In the poll, which was released by Echelon Insights, Paxton received 42% of the vote compared to Cornyn's 37%. The poll surveyed 515 likely Texas Republican primary voters between August 21st and 24th, with a 4.5% margin of error. When asked if they've seen more positive or negative information about each candidate, Cornyn had a better outcome with 35 to 21% being positive. Paxton's score was 31 to 32. So that would be 31 positive, 32 negative. According to the poll, Republican primary voters in the GOP stronghold favor the congressional redistrict plan set in motion by Governor Greg Abbott. The poll shows a margin of 78 to 12, backing it with 60% saying they strongly support it. Paxton scored a 63% favorability rating versus 24% unfavorability rating, while Cornyn's favorability is 51% compared to 32% unfavorable. So Cornyn has also seen his numbers rise up in this poll compared to other past polls. In a recent internal poll this month from former Democratic Representative Colin Allred's campaign, it showed Paxton down in the race against him. However, in an Emerson College poll this month, Paxton leading Allred by 5 points with 46% versus 41%. I'll be going more into that in just one moment as well. But I'm covering this poll in a way that's very interesting here, because when this news first happened that John Cornyn and Ken Paxton would be facing off against each other in the Republican primary, it quickly looked like Ken Paxton could not lose this Republican primary. The first poll that came out from back in July showed Paxton already at 51% of the vote, Cornyn down at 31%. Victory Insights from back in January, that was in 2022, I should mention that. But back in January, the first poll had Paxton at 42, Cornyn at 34. Fabrizio Lee and Associates, a very close top pollster that's allied with President Trump, is one of President Trump's top pollsters, showed Paxton leading 53 to 28 towards the end of January and beginning of February. Again, John Cornyn is the incumbent U.S. Senator here, and he was down by that much. Now, a Democratic-aligned pollster had it as a 9-point race from Paxton versus Cornyn, and these polls we've been tracking over the last few months or so. You see places like YouGov and Texas Southern University showing Paxton leading by about 9 points. You see UT Tyler, I believe that's University of Texas Tyler, May 28th, June 7th, a 10-point lead for Paxton. Pulse Decision Science, a Republican pollster allied with Ken Paxton, 57-38%. Texas Southern University did a poll, though, at the beginning of August, showing Paxton leading Cornyn by about 5 points. Emerson College, most recently, just did a poll in August 11th to 12th, showed Cornyn leading over Paxton by about 1 point. And now Echelon Insights poll, who has Ken Paxton at 42, Cornyn 37, a 5-point race. So what's the trend here? Well, you could argue that in most of these polls, Paxton's still leading, but the last 3 polls, all in the month of August, have shown this race has narrowed up a lot, that the massive 10 to 20 point lead that Ken Paxton once had over John Cornyn seems to be gone. And it's not really so much that John Cornyn's made up a lot of support, because he really hasn't here. Cornyn's at 37% in the Echelon poll. Emerson only has John Cornyn at 30. Texas Southern has Cornyn at 39. But Ken Paxton's numbers are what have changed. Back in April and May, Paxton was around 50%, 56%, 52%, 52%, 50%, 49%, 57% from back in June from the Pulse Science Decision, the internal poll. But in these most recent polls, Paxton's at 42% in Echelon Insights, only 29% in the Emerson College poll, and Texas Southern poll has Paxton at 44%. Now, on the worst case here, this is saying that Ken Paxton, as the Attorney General of Texas, who has gone through an impeachment trial against him, still has at least a 50-50 chance at defeating the incumbent U.S. Senator in the Republican primary at this current point in time. One poll shows Paxton up 5, another poll shows Paxton up 5, Emerson shows Paxton down 1. So the average of these 3 polls suggests that Paxton is slightly favored to still defeat John Cornyn in the primary. But something seems to have definitely shifted in the month of August from the summertime, that Ken Paxton's numbers have gone down in support, whereas John Cornyn's numbers have gone up by about 3 or 4%. Not a drastic gain for Cornyn, but Paxton seems to be losing support. Now, there's a big elephant in the room here, and no pun intended, seeing as he is the most important Republican in the United States, but President Donald Trump has not yet made an endorsement in this race. And President Trump recently sent out a statement saying that he is both he was asked about the Senate race and says he is both friends and a fan of Cornyn and Paxton as 2 Republicans that he likes and are both very loyal to him. So Trump has not officially made a decision in this race. And this also comes as John Cornyn a few months ago hired several top pollsters and campaign managers and directors that worked for President Trump during 2024 and are close allies of the president to help run his campaign. So John Cornyn's clearly trying to win the favor of President Trump and the Make America Great Again movement, especially as early on the polling numbers were showing he was not very well liked by the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, who viewed him as a rhino, a Republican in name only. And Ken Paxton was capitalizing on that as being the true MAGA candidate that has always stayed with President Trump. Now these three most recent polls show a very different race, where it's not going to be the big blowout the early polls were suggesting. It's going to be a very tight race that both Cornyn and Paxton are capable of winning at this current point in time. Another big avenue here is look at the undecided numbers. Echelon Insights had 21% undecided. Emerson College had 36% undecided, the largest undecided number we've seen in any of these polls. Coincidentally, it's also the smallest sample size, but Emerson's polling is usually pretty good. 17% from Texas Southern University undecided. There are a lot of Texas Republicans whose minds are not yet made up on whether to vote for Cornyn or Paxton. And you could bet if President Trump makes an endorsement for one candidate over the other, those 17%, 21%, or 36% are certainly going to be swayed by what the president decides to do. So this race is very close right now. It's definitely tightening up. Paxton may have a slight lead over Cornyn at this current point in time, but this is certainly a very, very close race that President Trump's decision may very well make the difference in this race. And then it comes to the general election, which is also not necessarily a slam dunk. 4 Democrats are currently running, including 2024 nominee for U.S. Senate Colin Allred. All eyes right now are currently on 3 Democrats, Joaquin Castro, Beto O'Rourke, and James Talarico. Talarico's name has been out there in the media a lot recently with the Texas redistricting situation. They're all being watched as potential candidates to enter the race as well. Talarico, especially, his name is being talked about. And it's shown that this Democratic primary, if it Allred versus any of these other candidates, could be really competitive. Texas Southern University asked this in the recent poll that if Allred ran against Beto O'Rourke, O'Rourke would actually lead Allred by about 20 points. For Allred versus Talarico, it's a 7-point lead for Allred, 50-43, with 7% undecided. So a very close race on that one. Allred leads over Joaquin Castro by the largest margin, 52-41. So the Democratic primary could potentially get competitive as well if any of these other candidates decide to jump in. As for the general election, it's currently listed as likely Republican from Inside Elections, Cook Political Report, and Sabdo's Crystal Ball, and Racewell White House has it as tilt Republican. The race has been pretty consistent here. When it's John Cornyn versus Colin Allred, for the most part, this looks like a pretty reliably red win. The Emerson College poll from, again, back in August, or earlier in August, showed Cornyn at 45%, Allred 38%, 17% undecided, roughly a 7-point lead. The only other poll came from YouGov and Texas Southern from back in May, which showed about a 4-point lead for Cornyn. Now, for Paxton versus Allred, this poll here, which is sponsored by Allred's campaign, so certainly take this with a grain of salt, shows Colin Allred leading over Paxton by 2%. But seeing that's a campaign internal poll, we could probably disregard this one. Emerson College's poll showed Paxton leading over Allred by about 5 points, 46-41. So, and the difference between Cornyn versus Paxton has 1% more support than John Cornyn does, but Colin Allred also has 3% support more than he did against John Cornyn, 13% undecided, only a 5-point margin on that one. And that's pretty consistent with YouGov's Texas Southern poll, which was a 4-point lead for Cornyn, showing a 2-point lead for Paxton versus Allred. And you can go through all the other matchups of the Democrats versus the 2 Republican candidates. It's very consistent that Ken Paxton has a tougher time beating the Democrat than John Cornyn does. So what happens in this Republican primary is very, very big for the general election. It's also worth noting the Texas Senate race. We just saw one in 2024. Ted Cruz defeated Democrat Colin Allred by 8.5%, a likely Republican win. That was on the same ballot that President Trump won the state by 13.7%. But don't think just because Texas was pretty reliably red in 2024 that it can't get competitive. In 2020, we did see the Senate race for John Cornyn be about a 9.6% win. But in 2018, Ted Cruz only defeated Beto O'Rourke by 2.6%. In 2018 was the big Democratic midterm wave year that Democrats are hoping will happen again in 2026. And if the Democrats end up being right and a big midterm wave election does happen, well, Texas being under 5 points could potentially happen if Ken Paxton becomes the Republican nominee. I don't think John Cornyn is going to have that much of trouble in the general election, but if it's Ken Paxton, given his scandal-plagued past, it certainly could become a very real possibility Democrats are looking at an under 5-point Republican margin of victory in the state of Texas, which at very least excites Democrats and gives them some potential on the 26th Senate map. Where Republicans, I currently have favored in 52 Senate seats, Democrats in 45. Texas I have listed as likely Republican in between 5 and 15%. But I've long said that if Ken Paxton becomes the Republican nominee, I'm shifting this race to lean Republican and making it a under 5-point victory, because I am either that confident or that unconfident that Ken Paxton would be a strong enough candidate in the general election to win by the same margins that John Cornyn would. Maybe Paxton would be a more vocal, strong supporter of President Trump on several issues, but as for the general election, he would have a much tougher time at winning the Senate race than John Cornyn would. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and any statements you want to make about this video or anything that I discussed, please leave it all down below. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in a future video.